processes. So for that, to move our discussions further, I'd like to invite James Donnell from TechWorks Consulting. James has a practical use case as for an organization, government organization in the US, how they are using actually eBA as a low-code workflow platform to digitize and automate their business processes to serve them better in this digital age. And as our panelists mentioned earlier, we are living in the age of COVID-19. So that is why being able to utilize technologies such as eBA for remote work is safe, it is efficient. Also, you can manage your records in a more efficient way. You can retrieve anytime, you can have reports, you can have notifications, reminders. So learning about how companies, organizations are actually using eBA is also an example of how actually other organizations can also benefit from it. So for that, I'd like to invite James Donnell to our virtual stage. James, you are ready?
Yes, thank you very much. Let me see if I could share my screen.
Perfect. I'll stop sharing, so floor is yours.
Okay. Everything now?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity today. And of course, thanks to Ed and Chris. I work for TechWorks Consulting. You heard from our president earlier today, Chris Coluccio. And today what I'd like to kind of go over is a practical case. This is a real life case, somebody that we have a relationship with, we have had done business with, and came across a way to apply the EVA platform, kind of right out of the box and in a way that will benefit everybody. So without further ado, we'll kind of get into what I'd like to call a practical case. What I'd like to do is kind of give you a little overview of the client and what they do, what we're hoping to achieve in the project, areas that we focused on, kind of how we made it happen. And as Ed mentioned, no, you don't need a programmer to accomplish this. If you got a good business acumen and some good people to back you up, you can make this happen. And the Bimser team is very supportive. I work with Sam a lot as well as Kevin on his team, and we were able to get a lot done and position ourselves and the client for future success as well. So business opportunities are like buses. There's always another one coming. Very apropos quote. In my role at TechWorks, we kind of go out and I talk to many different individuals, many different types of businesses, and our conversations really do not focus necessarily on any particular product. We focus on the business. We try to take a look at the business and see what's coming, see where they want to go, find out what the pain points may or may not be, find out what the growth points are, what they're struggling with. And now from that becomes an opportunity, not necessarily geared to any particular product at the beginning, but it's an opportunity because somebody that has a need or somebody that has a want, all right, represents an opportunity for companies. That company could be ourselves, it could be Bimser, it could be Ed, it could be everybody sharing. It doesn't necessarily matter, but it's an opportunity. So our client in this case is a government-based entity. Like many government entities, they suffered from funding over the years and probably a lack of vision as the leadership in the village has a tendency to turn over every 4 years or so in certain positions, and in other positions, people are long tenured and don't want to change what they already know. We went into this particular client. We performed an assessment of the entire entity. We took a look at a number of departments, a number of buildings, a number of locations that they run, how they do business, what their current workflow is, what's important to them, and what they were trying to accomplish. So we started out with an assessment. An assessment is always a good place to start. It's a process that the client basically is willing to open up with you and allow you the time and effort to go in and find out how you can benefit them the most. Just kind of a regional summary. They have around 8,500 residents. Half of them are of the white collar. They have a average household income of 152,000, and then they use cars and trains to transport. So for the most part, they're a suburban type community, prototypical of the Long Island environment. Today's area of focus that we're going to speak to a little bit is 3 areas in particular that emerged as we went through our assessment. The building department, the assessor's department, and the tax department. The building department functions as the way that they control what the look, feel, and tax base of the neighborhood continues to be over time. The assessor's department makes sure that after permits and everything are approved, work gets performed, and COs are issued, that the tax department basically gets notified and can raise the tax base so the village has money to function. That's kind of the overview. The primary goals were to improve the resident experience, because as we get into this a little bit, you'll hear that to do just about anything in this particular entity, you need to file some sort of permit. If you want to break a curb, you need a permit. You want to add a fence, you need a permit. You want to add a bathroom, you need a permit. You want to alter a room, you need a permit. You want to electrical work, a permit. Add a basement, apartment, permit. Everything was permitted. Everything required the resident to come in to the village hall, to file paperwork, to pay for it manually, and to come back with their contractor to show proof that the contractor was licensed, that they were approved to do work in the village. It was very time consuming. It was caused extremely long lines, and it was frustrating to the residents. From the village's perspective, they also wanted to reduce the lines. There were lines in Village Hall sometimes going out the door prior to this, because every time the contractors and people wanted work, everybody's on the same line looking to get time with the building department. The village also wanted to approve and automate the practices as possible. Everything was very manually driven, a tremendous amount of paper being generated both internally and externally, and they wanted a way to leverage some type of technology investment so it could not only serve those 3 departments, but the village as a whole. When we went to the village, one thing that was obvious was there's a tremendous amount of paper, and we'll get to this in a little bit, but when I mean a tremendous amount of paper, we're talking about 60 years of paper records. So there's a tremendous amount of paper there. And because of COVID and things that were going on, they also wanted the ability to work remotely. This kind of got us really to a point fast where it looked like the eBA situation and the eBA tools would lend us to recommend it. I sat down with Kevin, we had some communication, we assessed the situation, we evaluated what was going on. I kind of gave the client a high-level overview of what was possible. We sat down and created some action items. We identified who was going to do what, how we could do it. We tried to lay out a timeline and basically get back to the client with what we had hoped would be the vital solution. All right. Once we've got the client's buy-in, we followed up with interviews with key staff. In these departments, we have a building superintendent, we have a manager, we have a controller, we have people of various roles, various different things that all play different but similar contributions to the workflow. All right, we needed to identify what each department's purpose was, what each person's role was, who needs to be notified along the way, identify what forms need to be addressed. What are the forms that are most used that will give us the biggest bang for the buck, to redesign them and to create a new workflow that'll allow the village to reach its goals. We had to assess the current system, what capabilities it had, what the limitations were. And then the village had a software program that they were utilizing. Could we tie into that program? Were we able to interface? Would we be able to fully automate soup to nuts? These are all things that we needed to evaluate at the beginning. All right. To give you an example, here's some of the forms that were in existence at the beginning. And there's no particular order here or anything. It's just to show you amended permit, fence permit, central air conditioning permit. Everything there requires a permit. Everything was paper. In some cases, you'll see 2 copies, 3 copies, fees. Nothing was really designed in a way to really streamline the client experience or the internal experience. So what did we do? We evaluated what the situation was. We created business teams. Those business teams included TechWorks, Bimser, as well as the client. And the client had different responsibilities based on different roles, albeit the superintendent in this particular case did take the lead role in many cases. We identified a to-do list. Who was responsible for getting us what information, when we needed it by, how we did it, how we could perform it. Then we proceeded to put out a timeline. We tried to get this timeline in a way that we thought would be the most efficient. Then we met with the client. The client kind of changed that timeline a little bit based on their client availability. We established a rhythm. It's important to meet on a regular basis to make sure that the client stays engaged, that we stay focused, and that the goals are met. In a situation like this, where there's so many different forms, each one of those things are little victories. And in some cases, we make recommendations along the way. And as Ed alluded to before, the workflow tool that Bimser and eBA use makes it quite easily to see where we can make some improvements, and to the point where the superintendent was all at their various points going to the workflow and looking to make recommendations and looking to change things. So it's very, very easy to get clients that are even non-technical adapted to this application to help them use. Once we've established a rhythm, we put goals to every meeting. TechWorks and Bimser basically manage the client expectations, and we move this thing forward. The important thing we had to do was we coupled the technology, make sure there was security so they could do their jobs remotely if necessary. There was the necessary functionality, and they'd be able to grow the solution as time went on beyond just the building department. We had a kickoff. Again, we reiterated the client priority list. I can't stress client priority list enough, because the clients, generally speaking, can be all over the place because they're distracted like everybody else. They have a regular job to do, they lose focus. We review the forms on a weekly basis. We make sure that any progress that was made to the client's liking. All right. We map out the workflow, then we tested it. Then we tested it again. Then we gave it to the client to test. Then the client was supposed to test it. We come to the next meeting and we make sure the client has tested it. And if not, we test it again. And if I didn't mention it, we test, because things change, workflow changes, different folks in the workflow, besides the superintendent, do different things with information. So we have to make sure that everybody along the workflow and everybody that uses that information is aware. We also wanted to establish ways to improve the process. So we inserted various communications along the line. So as a permit moved along the process, emails would be sent out to both the internal staff as well as the client, letting them know where in the process they were. So things were improved. There was regular communication. Nobody was in the dark. We made recommendations as to how you could redesign some of the paper forms, perhaps condense some of those individual forms into one generalized form where you just check a box and it indicates what to do with it. We worked alongside the client. We made sure everything that was done was with the client's guidance, and also made sure that it checked all the boxes. We needed an automated signature process. We wanted to automate the way the documents would be submitted and make sure that they could pay online as well. All of that was developed and tested multiple times to the point where we got the user sign off. So you would think that would be a good victory, but wait, after user sign off, it goes to the legal team. The legal team reviews it, and of course there were changes. Anytime you bring anything to a legal department, there's usually changes. After we cleared the first level with that, there was a presentation given to the Board of Trustees and the mayor. The mayor and the Board of Trustees made their recommendations. There were more changes. After the changes, there was more testing. Then after the testing, we gave a final review of the final forms. There was more testing. And we tested it again. Then there was a soft rollout. We did a soft rollout with the client. The client looks to utilize just certain vendors, certain people during the soft rollout period to test, again, make sure that the experience meets their needs. And then there's a final rollout. When the final rollout game, it basically positions everybody for this year. So what having the building department being able to leverage all the forms given so far, they've got about 12 forms left to remain. Those will be addressed this year. All right. It will basically now be the strategy, it leads to the strategy to leverage the platform and feed the assessor's office. Once the CO is officially granted, we will be feeding the assessor's office electronically. The assessor's office will now update their records, and with a table that we will be creating interfaced with the building department, all right, and based on the type of improvement, impact or adjust the taxable, the result of the improvement, whatever that tax assessment change will be automated. In reviewing the assessor's department, we also found that there's basically two-sided business cards going back to 1935 or so that are in existence for every property in the town. And that's the way the assessor's office currently keeps track of things, and that's the way they also update the property records on these cards. So we will be launching a digitized scanning initiative, which will allow us to scan and create templates so we can scan all of those cards and store them on eBA, basically digitize them, index them so they can search on all the key records, and remove the paper that's been in existence for however many years. We will then also be designing a new document, an e-document, that when any new properties or anything happens, these e-documents can be created. So if there is new building or anything else, we don't have to go to cards. They can just update an e-document. Again, all of this is leveraging the eBA platform that they've installed, paid for. We put on it's currently running on a separate server just for them. So kind of like Ed mentioned before, and Chris, with digital transformation, efficiencies come from proactively transforming how we do business. When an organization invests in technology, allowing them to embrace a new workflow and keeping them safe while doing it, delivers a better experience for both the client and their clients. everybody wins. eBA is key to this because it's an ideal workflow tool that plugs into anything. I mentioned that the client had software before. We were able to tie into the client's software. Unfortunately, the client's vendor would not allow it. So at this point, they do part of it the old way, and we can't have a automated feed, but our hope is in the next year or so that will go away and change. And that's kind of a practical case of how we applied eBA. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Yes, James, thank you so much. So yes, we have questions, and I received some questions also. To our attendees, in case you have any questions, please click the Q&A button and you can type your questions so that we can see them and we can address them. So one of the questions actually I received is about cities, towns, and other administrations, basically nationwide in the US. And one of the questions about there are many different public administrations or counties, just like what you described, with hundreds, with documents coming from 1950s or maybe earlier, and they are pretty much paper-based. So where they should start from? We had a great presentation earlier from Chris as part of our keynote. And he mentioned about leadership, he mentioned about having the mindset, for example. So what do you think that those towns, counties, cities buried on paper, running their operations paper-based, they should start from?
I think any operation, regardless of whether it's a city, village, town entity or anything that's got a tremendous amount of paper, could benefit from a program like this that could digitize the paper and make it accessible in a way that's not only less not only less space, but makes it more functional to them. The biggest challenge is overcoming, I believe, the stigma that nobody wants to own the process because it's going to be a long and onerous process, and nobody wants to go through all these tickets, and nobody wants to have the budget on their watch because it's invisible sometimes to the public. The public will see the net result, but the public doesn't. When they walk in, they see 5 rooms of file cabinets. The public doesn't necessarily understand what's inside those 5 rooms of filing cabinets. So any type of automation is good, and any type of digitization of that information. I mean, information is your most important tool, no matter what business you run. So it makes sense that you have access to that information in a more automated, efficient manner. Even if they don't go back to the beginning, I would recommend anybody, even if draw a line in the sand, say anything from 1970 forward. Anything is better than nothing. At least you set a precedence. But yeah, I think they all could benefit.
Thank you, James. So okay, let's see. We have some other questions coming up. For example, in the organization, what person in the organization is most interested in automating the workflow when you engage with them? In terms of
I could speak from experience being really close with this particular client. I believe from day one, the mayor, the controller, and the head of the building department all embraced the concept. There really was no one person that said, "Oh, we can't do that," or they stood in the way. They all saw the benefit. I think the hardest thing to overcome was for them to come up with dollars, to put a budget to it, because obviously they didn't plan on going in, which is why we broke the project up in a couple of different phases. So they were able to absorb part of the project last year, and we'll do another part of the project this year with the goal of next year rolling it out to other parts of the village.
Okay, great. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I see some questions coming from attendees. Please click the Q&A button and you can type your question and we can address during this session. So we'll be happy to address your questions with the Q&A button, please. If you can type, that'd be great. Another a question that we got from one of our attendees is actually, you mentioned that there is no need for coding when you are digitizing. So the organization must have someone on staff to manage the process of digitization?
I would say every project of any part needs a project champion. You need somebody on the inside that's going to basically take some responsibility to lead the endeavor and make sure that there's some ownership on the client side. We can't do it strictly, you can't do it alone and I can't do it alone. We need somebody from the client side. Once we understand what the current workflow is and what needs to be accomplished, yes, then it becomes more of us and the Bimser team developing what they need. So we give them kind of a straw man to look at, and then they can come back and say, I'd really like this, or could you do this, and things like that. But we're not really, you don't really need somebody super technical to code on the client side.
Thank you, James. Okay, we have another question coming from one of our attendees. So how are the IT department actually reacting to embracing eBA in the organization?
Well, I'll answer that in two ways. As part of our assessment process, TechWorks usurped the current IT department. So we took over responsibility for the network and everything earlier in the year. So in this case, it became relatively easy because obviously TechWorks wants to support this technology. We see the benefit for the client. The incumbent was there a number of years and quite honestly had just given them a service based on a budget. You know, we give you general antivirus, we'll let you know when your server goes down, and that's it. They weren't a proactive managed service client. There are many MSAs that aren't necessarily managing with their clients or actively participating. We take a little bit different approach. At TechWorks, we kind of, you know, we are joined at the hip with our clients. We want to make sure we understand what's important to our clients and our clients' business. We want our clients to achieve their goals, and we want their technology to support the goals and support their growth. And if they're not sure how to get there, we want to help them create a roadmap to success. So in this case, you know, getting rid of the paper and improving the way they process and knocking down lines and becoming more functional during COVID so they could actually, the departments could still work, they could still pay their bills. All of that was tied to the assessment. Not all of that was tied to the Bimser solution, but different parts of it were. So in our case, the IT department generally, well, in our case, because we were the IT department, we didn't have much pushback at all because I was able to influence that decision.
Perfect. Yes, it actually worked. It was yeah, could be the other way around, right? In that scenario. But
right. Generally speaking, it doesn't take a lot of the IT guys' time. In this type of situation, it's more whoever's going to be the business sponsor. Whoever he appoints is, you know, all right, you're going to work with this guy on the inside. That's the guy who's going to spend a little bit of time with it. And then it's just meetings to review the workflows and to go over the thing. We were lucky in a case at different parts of this meeting, different parts of the transition, the superintendent was smart enough to bring in his 2 or 3 key people at the right times to review what they did. They gave input, and a lot of times that's why things changed, because he didn't necessarily realize what they were doing with the information. Or in some cases, they corrected what he wanted to do because it wasn't reflective of reality anymore. You know, he had a process that he wasn't necessarily sure of. So it results in some change, but it's kind of a give and take. Sam and the crew were very easy to work with, very cooperative, very understanding, and you know, it was kind of a pleasure working with them. You know, and I know the client feels the same way.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yes, that's definitely a teamwork, and we also appreciate your efforts as well. So, well, like we always say, there is nothing better than a great partnership, and that is the goal of this event today, SYNERGIZE 2022. We like to share our experience with our ecosystem, and as well as with our partners, with our potential partners, our current customers, and our ecosystem in general. So in that sense, that's very important. In addition, we position SYNERGIZE as an event, as a platform. We also share knowledge since earlier today, and there is going to be more sharing moving forward, so that we can all learn, share, and improve our processes. That's the idea. And our scope is digital transformation, and how we can actually make it happen. As we learned from Chris earlier during the keynote speech, everything starts with the mindset and leadership. And based on what you actually share with us, that also actually verifies based on what we learned from Chris as well during the keynote speech. So that is great. I don't see any other questions from our attendees at the moment. If there's any questions for our attendees, please click the Q&A button. You have a Q&A button there. Please click it, and then please type your questions moving forward, and we'll be happy to address them. And in terms of timing, we are doing great. We are managing time very well. We've been actually presenting and addressing questions with regards to low-code technology, eBA, with regards to customers, clients, challenges, how to address those challenges in the scope of digital transformation, and how Bimser International, channel partners of Bimser International and clients are actually working together towards digital transformation. And that's a great sharing. James, thank you so much for the insights, and much appreciated. I think we can move to the next session as part of our SYNERGIZE 2022.